afternoon, everybody. My name is Bikash Barua. Welcome to the virtual discussion on the literacy of Bangabandhu's secular political ideals, challenges of radicalization in Bangladesh, and radio. Viewers, this program is being organized by European Bangladesh Forum, EPF, in association with its media partner, London-based British Bangla News. The program is live on British Bangla News TV. You can watch this program on YouTube and Facebook of the channel. Viewers, you may put your questions for the speakers in the chat box and we shall try to respond to those. Now, please let me introduce our guest speakers today. First of all, I invite Professor John Eade. He is the Professor of Sociology and Anthropology. Welcome, Professor.
Hello, thank you.
Welcome. And then I think I don't see Niels here. Then I welcome His Excellency Mr. M. Riaz Hamidullah, the Ambassador of Bangladesh in Netherlands. Welcome, Mr. Ambassador. Then we have Miss Mahjabeen Khaled. She's a former. Welcome, Miss Khaled. I see we have our Deputy High Commissioner of Bangladesh in UK, Mr. Mohammed Zulkarnain. In fact, he has replaced Her Excellency, the High Commissioner of Bangladesh in UK, Ms. Saida Muna Tasneem. Welcome, Mr. Nain. And we have, I saw for a while our good friend, the Dutch MP, Mr. Niels van den Berg. Niels, most welcome. You unmute your microphone, please. Yes, Niels, most welcome. Yes, finally you got you. And last but not the least, we have our my colleague, Mr. Ansar Hamidullah. He is the co-founder president of EBF, based in UK.
Hello and greetings to all.
Thank you very much. We shall now please, before we give the floor to the speakers, our distinguished speakers, let me throw some lights on the subjects of today's discussion. We'll try to concentrate mainly on two areas. Number one, Bangabandhu's legacy of secular political ideals, and number two, challenges of radicalization in Bangladesh and the region. And to come to Bangabandhu, there's no doubt that Bangabandhu held the secular political views throughout his life. He had a marked aversion towards religious segregation, but it would be wrong and injustice if we say he was against religion. Rather, we know that he was a devout Muslim, and practicing religion in private, Bangabandhu had no reservation. The Communist Party leaders, Comrade Muni Singh and Professor Muzaffar Ahmed, once viewed Bangabandhu's secularism as Islamization in disguise. But we know that the fabric on which Bangabandhu's political philosophy was erected was essentially secular. When he was an activist of the Muslim League, he belonged to the progressive part or progressive section of the party, and we saw that later he dropped the word Muslim from the party name, Awami Muslim League, despite the opposition from his party leaders, including Khondokar Mustaq Ahmed. Bangabandhu was not only a secular leader in the true sense, he was the champion of secularism. Bangabandhu's position was clear in his famous speech on the parade ground in Kolkata on his return to Bangladesh from Pakistan jail via London, when he announced, first I am a human being, then a Bengali, and after that a Muslim. In his famous The Unfinished Memoir, or in Bengali, Ashamabdu Atmajiboni, Bangabandhu painted a piece of his mind about the riot in 1946. He wrote, "We managed to save some of the Hindu families living around Bakar hostel, that people could treat each other in this way was too frightening a thought. And when a similar tragedy took place in 1964, a riot, Bangabandhu put up a formidable resistance against it as a convener of the anti-riot committee. But today, the million-dollar question, where is that legacy of Bangabandhu in his Sonar Bangla? With the assassination of Bangabandhu in 1975, the political scenario of Bangladesh totally changed upside down. The ideology and the spirits that led Bengalis to the liberation war were changed overnight. And we unfortunately saw the rise of radicalization among the youth, rise of violent extremism across the country and in the region in the name of religion, which has today become a big challenge. A challenge to our culture, a challenge to our tradition, and which the violent extremists see as a threat to religion. Anyway, distinguished guests, I will not go further. This I would like to invite now His Excellency Mr. M. Riaz Hamidullah, Ambassador of Bangladesh in Netherlands. Before I give floor to His Excellency, let me say a few words of the Ambassador. Mr. Hamidullah served as the High Commissioner of Bangladesh to Sri Lanka from 2016 to 2020. Earlier, he served at the Bangladesh Permanent Mission to the United Nations New York in 1999 to 2003. Later, as a mid-career political officer in Bangladesh Mission in New Delhi, India, in 2003 to 2005. Mr. Hamidullah worked on South Asian regional cooperation, including a 3.5-year stint at SAARC Secretariat in Kathmandu, Nepal, as a director. He also served as Director General in charge of Europe and EU affairs in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Bangladesh. He did graduation and post-graduation in economics, respectively from India and Bangladesh, and he joined Bangladesh Foreign Service in 1995. The floor is to you, Your Excellency, please.
Thank you, Bikash. Great pleasure to connect with all of you, particularly only last week when we launched finally the Dutch translation of the unfinished memoir of Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. To all distinguished panelists, I'll try to be very cryptic in the interest of time. 55 years of life, 12 years in prison, and we are trying to understand that a statesman who not only was a statesman for his own people, which is us, our own people, Bangladeshis, but also who stood apart very uniquely in contemporary South Asia during his time, meaning last century. And today we are, after 45 years of his brutal assassination, we're trying to see that how does he connect with, relate to, with contemporary world in terms of valuing values. As I was trying to reflect, and this, I mean, last 2 weeks we were in series of interactions trying to understand that. I think one thing crosses my mind in very simplistic way, which is his own life, his life, very tumultuous life, was essentially about valuing values. If we read his accounts, his reflections, when he went to school, where he stood up, went to during the anti-riot campaign, when he went to Islamia College, it was all about valuing values. People misunderstood him. Sometimes people thought, as you rightly said, that sometimes even the communists who were very strong during that time, they even said that no, he is someone who is going, or the Islamists thought that he was going the communist way and vice versa. Now, when I say valuing values, I think the next point would be that he's trying to wonderfully navigate through the values, either it's cultural, either it's religion or social. And as I said, I need not go part of it, you actually already harped on, but clearly he distinguished between practicing as a practicing Muslim in private life, but also when he stood before people he made distinction that that has to remain in his private life, and in the social and political life, he can and he does champion secularism. Um, if in his later life or times when we look at what he spoke on 10th of January 1972 on his arrival from the peasants and making the first landing in Bangladesh, what he said I think are almost epochal. We hear it often, but if we desegregate that, dissect that, some of the things actually must resonate even beyond today in 2021. Essentially, he harped the four pillars which later got embodied in the constitution: secularism, pluralism, inclusion, and even socialism as not only as a matter of economic pillar, but also in terms of creating the overall political governance framework eventually. And also perhaps ethos, because that translates into justice, that translates about addressing inequality in every possible form, not simply in terms of economic inequality. Now, if we further break those down and see what he said from 1972 till his assassination in August 1975, he was essentially harping over and over again in terms of injustices in every possible form, any form of deprivation, inequalities, as I said, and rising above those also about that are so often spoken, including in Europe today, about tolerance and harmony. When we were negotiating on SDGs, for example, goal 16, and we saw a very intense divide. For Bangladesh, frankly, it was very easy because we look at his words and it was very clear that we should not shy away or we should not at all be worried in terms of dealing with or accepting anything that are embedded on tolerance, harmony in any possible form. Now, I was reading a very interesting thing, and a couple of things actually crossed here. And I got a very interesting reference from one of the seminal articles that was authored by none other than National Professor, late Professor Abdul Razak. And he authored a piece, it appeared quite some time back, on titled Secularism, Bangabandhu and Bangladesh, where I quote, he said, the leaders of the freedom struggle in the Indian subcontinent, among the leaders, Sheikh Mujib had a unique, though unrecognized place. Mujib was the first to develop, quote, linguistic nationalism as opposed to Gandhi's territorial nationalism and Jinnah's religious, meaning Islamic nationalism. Mujib's Bengali nationalism transcended religious communities and emphasized bonds of language and culture rather than religion. And that's how he defined that Mujib's, and he says Mujib's nationalism was thus secular, unquote. Now, what does he insinuate that? If I go further, it's on record that in 1973, when Bangabandhu went to NAM Summit, Non-Alignment Summit, where none other than King Faisal of Saudi Arabia and Muammar Gaddafi of Libya approached him and said that, why don't you declare, because you come from a Muslim majority, why don't you declare Bangladesh as the Islamic Republic of Bangladesh, rather than saying People's Republic of Bangladesh? And he categorically, instantly, on record, beamed that. He said, no, that's untenable for me, for my people, and for what we stood for. That's why I said upfront that it was his entire journey was essentially about valuing values. That was not easy during his time, and even it's not easy in contemporary times as we see Bangladesh. There could be more, but if I connect, or one would connect what he said, his own journey, as I said, tumultuous life, and standing today in Europe or South Asia and Bangladesh, I may say something very upfront, and I recognize a distinguished member of parliament also in our midst. But I think let's confront what we see the contemporary times and our world. It's essentially how do we deal with the narrative of majoritarianism and nationalism. That's where it is coming to. Sometimes there are very defining, very thin lines. End of the day, I was asking my own self, and I was in Sri Lanka for 4 years. I realized that there was a debate, and I said that, look, everyone at the end of the day is born patriot. So what are the defining lines between patriotism and nationalism? Everyone is patriotic, and that's very logical. That's normal and accept, and we actually should love it. We do love it. Problem is when we try to take it further and then we bring in the elements of jingoism and we try to blend it with, or either formally or informally, knowingly or unknowingly, try to blend with the elements of majoritarianism, that's when things go wrong, already. And that's what we see in many parts of the world. In fact, there was a question which was coming in The Hague that while in Asia, contemporary Asia, where we have so many functioning democracies, why is it that only 6 countries from Asia are within the membership of International Criminal Court? Is there any dichotomy in terms of accepting the norms of inclusion, tolerance, harmony on which the Rome statutes are built upon? I hope I'm making a point, but in the interest of time, I'll move very fast. Now, question is that it's also, as we may see in contemporary times, and again we may connect with what Bangabandhu said, that stoking nationalism or trying to take it with a blending with element of pride is easy, but the moment it goes into that majoritarian narrative, which Bangabandhu very carefully tried to keep away Bangladeshis and Bangladesh from, being a country with 80% Muslim majority, and that too Sunni Muslim majority, he didn't allow any kind of Shia Sunni sense to come up, or that anyone to be looked at on the street or in the marketplace or in the farm field or in the factories, that what is your identity. The issue of identity is also very strong in many places across the world. But if you look at Bangladesh, that's what I think he was, I mean, many of us at that time could not realize. But if you fast forward today, 4 or 5 decades later, it's very clear today when the world, every place around are trying to sort of struggling to deal with ethnic identity, linguistic identity, or religious identity, Bangladesh that way has actually stood apart and stands apart. That, I think, is a phenomenal thing that we need to relook. And I would dare say that elsewhere, whether that is to be replicated or his works, but essentially, I would humbly say that let's understand that what he said, and beneath that, why did he say that? Maybe he said during 60s, 50s, 60s, and 70s, but understanding that and then bringing those up may have some contemporary value. As I said, this should then take us to the point of, and that's where I would end, as to understand that when in contemporary times we are talking about radicalization, what is radicalization? Where is radicalization? I'll draw an interesting reference to a 2011 white paper which came from House of Commons, which actually was being championed by a Labour MP called Keith Vaz. And I remember there was a very fiery conversation in University of Leicester, where he said that, look, radicalization is not simply in terms of the religious institutions that we look at, essentially in terms of madrasas and all that. Radicalization is happening in the cafes, university cafes, in campuses, in prisons, in places that we conventionally ignore. Point is that it is, and today, thanks to globalization, thanks to our championing liberalism and also technology, things are moving unabated. We saw it up close in July 2016 when we were shocked to the way things happen. So I think that would again take me back to my original pitch that while we all need to be worried, and rightfully so, but at the same time, can we think of how do we inculcate valuing values? My take would be essentially to accept that if we are to talk about where to look at Bangabandhu during his time, but essential to understand that what is the contemporaneous of Bangabandhu, his works and his words, I think we need to remain ceaselessly engaged in terms of continuity, in terms of being creative, in terms of curating content, and in terms of being very candid to each other. As radical as someone else's views be or positions be, but let's face it, and nothing should actually inhibit us, be it Asia, Africa, or even Europe. Thank you. Let me pause here.
Thank you, Your Excellency. and for this thought-provoking presentation. You have rightly said, which I liked, that is valuing values, on which was the, Bangabandhu propagated or believed. And the other point that radicalization, that it doesn't happen only in the madrasas of religious institution, it also happens in campus. And again, we see the rise of radicalization everywhere in Europe, in America. So thank you, Your Excellency. Now I would like to invite Miss Mahjabeen Khaled. She is the former MP, Member of Parliament of Bangladesh. As MP, she was a member of the Foreign Affairs Standing Committee of Bangladesh Parliament, member of Climate Parliamentary Committee, Caucus on Disability, Caucus on Children's Rights, Caucus on Parliamentarian for Nuclear Non-Proliferation and Disarmament, and the Committee of the Parliamentarians for Global Action. She graduated from Loreto College, Darjeeling, India. More notably, Ms. Khaled is the daughter of Major General Khaled Musharraf, Major General Khaled Musharraf Bir Uttam, who led the 3 November 1975 coup d'etat against the Khundekar Mustaq government, and on 7th November he was overthrown and assassinated. Under her father's command, K-Force played a crucial role in the unconditional surrender of the Pakistan Army on 16th December 1971. Ms. Mahjabeen Khaled, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bikash. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Good evening to everybody, our distinguished guests. I'm going to read from my paper. It's on Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, our father of the nation, Bangabandhu, and his secularism, his ideas of secularism. Sheikh Mujibur Rahman was the great political leader of Bangladesh, the founder of the idea of an independent Bangladesh, the biggest influence on the lives of Bangladeshis, the most admired person in Bengal, and he was rightfully given the name Bangabandhu, which means friend of Bengal, at a rally of students and masses in 1969. Going back to history of British India, we see before we became Bangladeshis, we were Indians and then Pakistanis. When the subcontinent gained independence from British Empire in 1947, it was partitioned into 2 states out of Muslim majority regions of British India, the West and the East Pakistan. While these 2 parts of Pakistan shared a common faith, Islam, there was significant cultural, linguistic, and political differences between them. The population in the eastern region, predominantly ethnically Bengali and speaking their own language, Bangla, was politically marginalized by Western region. Adding to these concerns was the refusal of the Pakistani government to recognize Bengali as an official language of United Pakistan, and their insistence on Urdu being the official language of the country. The 1947 partition led to a divide between Urdu and Bengali speakers, culminating in what is known as Bengal language movement. By 1952, however, the movement had become more confrontational in nature, directly challenging state authority. At the same time, the persistent social, political, and economic exclusion of East Pakistan electrified the formation of Bengali nationalist movement centered around the Bangladesh Army Muslim League under the leadership of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, who advocated for greater political and economic autonomy from central government. Mujib was one of the foremost charismatic nationalist leaders of the 20th century. He was Bengali nationalist leader without any parallel. From his high school days, he became committed to politics. Sheikh Mujib was the only Muslim student from East Bengal who won the hearts and minds of both Hindu and Muslim students at Kolkata Islamia College and was elected uncontested as General Secretary of its student union in 1946. He deeply valued the peace dividend of secular politics and inclusive society. As a student politician, he fought for the state of Pakistan. However, he was disappointed with the conspirational politics of Pakistan and its treatment to his fellow Bengalis. He joined the Army Muslim League, founded by Maulana Bhashani and Hussain Shahid Sarwardi in 1949, and started fighting for Bengali language and culture. However, the Pakistani government always sought to put him behind bar from time to time for his agitational politics. He stood for the national self-determination for his Bengali people and worked constantly to achieve it. By 1955, under Mujib leadership, the East Pakistan Army Muslim League was renamed the Army League, dropping the word Muslim to open the doors of the party to all, regardless of their religion. Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujib was now General Secretary of a secular army league in the East Wing of Pakistan, successfully embarking on his political roadmap to realize a secular homeland for the Bengalis. Be it the Bengali language movement of 1952 or his 1966 six-point Bengali Charter of Rights, landslide victory of his secular army league in 1970 election, his proud affirmation that no one can defeat the Bengalis. He was the symbol of Bangladesh. In dark days, in that testing time, he was alone the symbol. Bangabandhu's popularity skyrocketed and he became the undisputed leader of the Bengalis, who found their savior in him, who heard their voice resonating in him. And such was the extent of his popularity that the military junta of Pakistan was forced to withdraw the false and infamous Agartala conspiracy case and drop all false charges against him and release him unconditionally from the prison in the wake of mass upsurge in East Pakistan in February 1969. When his party won a landslide victory in the first general election held in Pakistan in 1970, unfortunately, the Pakistani military was not willing to transfer power to his party. As a result, Mujib started a non-violent, non-cooperation movement in March 1971 and virtually took over East Pakistan as its de facto leader. Bangabandhu delivered his historic 7th March 1971 speech in which he called upon his people to fight for national independence. Indeed, his speech is regarded as one of the most significant speeches in world history. Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujib was not only gallantly leading the Bengali nation from the front as its undisputed visionary leader in all its freedom and rights movements, but also ideologically asserting the credential and characteristics of a secular and inclusive republic that Bangladesh would be. This speech of Bangabandhu provided inspiration to Bengali people in their quest for freedom and inspired the whole nation to take part in the liberation war of Bangladesh in order to free the country. Finally, he declared the independence of Bangladesh in March 26, 1971, and arrested and was taken to West Pakistan. Here, I like to mention that my father, Khaled Musharraf, then a major of Pakistan Army, declared independence on behalf of Bangabandhu against the Pakistani Army. Khaled Musharraf was the Sector 2 commander of Bangladesh forces, leader of K-Force Brigade commander during the Bangladesh War of Independence. He fought fiercely for Bangladesh independence and was wounded in frontline combat against the Bangladesh Army. Under his command, K-Force played a crucial role in the unconditional surrender of the Pakistani Army on the 16th December 1971. The Pakistani occupation army committed one of the most heinous genocide in history of Bangladesh. And they killed 3 million people. After Pakistan Army surrendered, the state of Bangladesh was born as an independent country. Mujib, who was released from Pakistani jail, finally came back to Bangladesh like a hero in 1972 and became its prime minister. Nationalism, secularism, socialism, and democracy were Mujib's philosophy. Sheikh Mujib was the best among those who had led the struggle for freedom. Firstly, to develop a linguistic nationalism which translated into Bengali nationalism. Secondly, for establishing a nation state with the unity of the different religious communities, and that puts Sheikh Mujib on the top. as he is created for establishing a true secular state. Sheikh Mujibur Rahman started constructing a war-damaged country but found it difficult to run. Both national and international conspiracies were noticeable to undo him. Unfortunately, in 1975, he was assassinated along with his family by few resentful elements of Bangladesh army. With the assassination of Bangabandhu, the politics, the ideology, spirits that led Bengalis to liberation war were changed overnight. The assassination of the father of the nation, the killing of the 4 national leaders in the custody in the Dhaka jail, central jail, who led the War of Independence, was a defeat of pro-liberation and secular people. My father, Khaled Musharraf, then a major general and supporter of Bangabandhu, could not sit back and do nothing. He decided to stop the killers and stage a coup d'etat. He declared himself the chief of military staff, but unfortunately, because of uprising of a military group on 7th November 1975, he was overthrown and assassinated. Bangabandhu was the champion of secularism. His charisma worked magic on people. The courage and charm that flowed from him made him unique, superhuman. His vision for a golden Bengal where people of all races, religions, and castes will be treated equally and prosper continues to live on in the hearts and minds of 165 million Bangladeshis. I'm thrilled that I have been given the opportunity to remembering him during the celebration of the anniversary of his birth, paying tribute to this great leader that no one can take away his visions. We have reasons to turn to Bangabandhu for guidance as well as inspiration for many years to come. At the end, I would like to thank EDF, European Bangladesh Forum, and especially Mr. Bikash Chowdhury Barua for inviting me to speak. Thank you again.
Thank you, Ms. Mahjabeen Khaled, for your presentation. Now, I would like to invite our next guest speaker, Professor John Eade. He is a professor of UK. He is a professor of sociology and anthropology, a visiting professor at Toronto University and former executive director of Center for Research on Nationalism, Ethnicity and Multiculturalism, which is linked to Roehampton and the University of Surrey. After research in Kolkata, India, on the social identity of the educated Bengali Muslims middle class, he completed his Ph.D. in 1986 on Bangladesh community politics in Tower Hamlets, London. Since then, he has researched the Islamization of urban space, globalization and the global city, British Bangladeshi identity politics, and travel and pilgrimage. Mr. Professor John Eade, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you very much indeed. I've done a PowerPoint presentation, which hopefully will be visible, but in case it's not, I will be working through it. I would just like to start with explaining my personal interest, because obviously as a white British guy, people might be wondering why I'm on this panel. And it really comes from a period of research that I began in Calcutta in 1971, where I wanted to meet Bengali Muslims who had remained in Calcutta rather than go to Dhaka at the partition of British India. And I wanted to look at 3 identities, which already have been discussed by the 2 previous speakers. The identity of being Bengali, the identity of being professional, that is, I wanted to meet middle-class Bengali Muslims, and thirdly, their Muslim identity. So how did people put those 3 identities together? And I was fortunate enough to be invited to live with one of the Bengali Muslim middle-class families. And of course, when you live in a family, you see the inside of a society far more than if you just go around talking to people. This was a professional family that traced its ancestry back to the early 19th century. And the father was Professor Tayyab, who became director of the Calcutta Madrasa and eventually ended up as chairman of the West Bengal Civil Service Commission. So he came from a Bengali Muslim family that was very much located within Calcutta, but some of his relatives had gone to Dhaka and became quite significant players in East Pakistan. But his wife was also a professional woman. She was librarian at Lady Brabourne College. So this family taught me a lot, I suppose, about how these different identities, class, Bengali language, Bengali identity, and Muslim identity were put together. I'm not saying that they were the only model, but they were certainly a very important model for me. And the mother, her mother had actually worked for Fazl Haq when he was a member of the Bengal Legislative Assembly between 1937 and 1947. And of course, I don't need to tell people who are watching this how important Fazl Haq was to the Bengali identity, Bengali language movement. So let me then talk about 1970-71. Of course, in 1971, with the crackdown, East Pakistan crackdown, relatives who had been in East Pakistan had to flee for their life. And so therefore, their relatives, a family of 5, the father was a lawyer from Bogra, fled with his wife and 3 children. And so we were living together in a 2-room flat for a time. So I got some insight into the massive disruption and the fear and anxiety that people from East Pakistan were experiencing at that time. And we obviously also talked a lot about the whole issue of secularism. What does secularism mean? And of course, the Indian Muslim minority are a very important minority, not just within India and India's national identity, but also globally. And so certainly at that time, I think there was considerable tolerance. We might say that perhaps since then things have changed quite a lot, but certainly secularism therefore meant very much tolerance of religious difference. And clearly this form of secularism is different from a kind of Western style of secularism, where many people might say that secularism is opposed to religion. And clearly, both in India and also, I think, Bangabandhu's vision was different from that secularism should be a secularism that allows for religious difference and religious tolerance.
Sorry, can I interfere? I mean, are you going to present also this your PowerPoint or no?
Yeah, well, I'm looking at my PowerPoint, so I just wondered how we make them visible.
Just to remind you about the time frame, and so keep it in mind, please. Thank you. Please carry on.
Okay. Okay. So now I want to talk about my involvement in Britain. I began a doctoral project on Bangladeshi community representation in Tower Hamlets, which people probably know is often seen as the heartland of the Bengali community, Bangladeshi community in Britain. So my interests switched from Calcutta to, okay, sorry, it's just on the share button. Can you see it now?
Unfortunately, no.
Oh, that's a shame.
No.
Application window. Can you see that now?
Mr. Munir, can you do anything? Mr. Munir, can you hear me?
And it's not appearing on the screen. Yes, it should. He can start because it looks on the screen.
We see a screen, a blackout screen. Nothing on the screen. I think, John, I think we dropped the idea of going for your PowerPoint presentation.
Okay.
I think let's drop it because time is running out.
Yeah. Okay, that's fine.
Mr. Munir, drop it, the idea, please. Please go ahead, Sir John.
Yeah.
Please go ahead.
Okay.
Please.
Okay, sorry. Okay, so basically,
I think we see on the screen, John.
Okay, can you see it?
Yes, yes.
Oh, that's very good. Okay, so shall I just quickly?
Please.
I'll just continue, yeah, and just okay. So so as you can see, I'm explaining here my my academic involvement, and it consists primarily of a study done in a very key period, 1980, 1986, when the second generation of young Bengalis got involved in the local politics. In other words, their argument was that we need to stop thinking of ourselves as back in Sylhet, back in Bangladesh. We must fight for our rights in Britain and in the local political structure. And people like Ansar were very much involved in that process. So this was, I think, the key period of 1980-86 was, I think, a key stage of involvement within Britain, and linked also to the settlement of the Bangladeshi community in Britain. And of course, this is developed in a similar way across Western Europe. Now, the activists were at that time predominantly influenced by the Awami League, by notions of secular nationalism. I think since then, since the late 80s, there has been a parallel movement linked to the development of mosques and madrasas, and I think this is linked to the important development of here we have. Sorry, I'll just come back to this. So just to talk about 1970-71, the second generation of young activists were very keen to build alliances with non-Bangladeshis, non-Bengalis. That was a key feature. And one of the key figures in this was the local Labour MP, Peter Shaw. And this was, of course, linked to the 1978 local elections, where the National Front campaigned very strongly. And this was the Bengali Bangladeshi garment worker, Altab Ali. And this stimulated young Bangladeshis to work with older Bangladeshis, first and second generation, to lead anti-racist protests. But it also encouraged, as I said before, an emerging group of younger generation Bangladeshis to engage with the British political structure rather than simply to think of themselves as simply going back and referring all the time to Bangladesh. And this was also an important time across London, because the local Labour Party had realised that it was becoming very obsolete because the older white generation were dying off or moving out. The transformation of the local Labour Party was encouraged also by the Greater London Council, led by Ken Livingstone, often referred to as Red Ken. And also, as younger Bangladeshis were entering the local educational system, the Inner London Education Authority supported various local community initiatives. And so, if you like, three things came together: secular national ideals, anti-racism, and also notions of multiculturalism. So just to repeat then, this period, 1980-1986, was, I think, a key period in the development of a settled British Bangladeshi population and its own activism.
You have another 2 minutes, John, to go. Please.
Lovely. Okay. So very quickly then, from 1986, I think the importance of Muslim identity has become stronger and stronger. This is linked, I think, to the arrival of wives and dependents, but also linked to increasing immigration controls. And I think this has led to an important shift amongst the younger generations. So we now have three generations where their vision is no longer so much bound up with Bangladesh, although it's still important, but they have a wider sense of global conflict and also a certain identification with an Islamic Ummah. And of course, this is linked to geopolitical developments like the Gulf War, the Iraq War, etc. So just finally then, this also, of course, is linked to British government strategy in terms of its anti-racism strategy. So finally, I think what we can see, therefore, is rather similar, actually, to what I was studying in Calcutta in 1971, the development of a multiple identity where people put together being British, being Bangladeshi, being Muslim, being Londoner, Londony, and professional. And I think this is, a very dynamic and also a very rich process that we should welcome rather than simply emphasize one identity above any other. Thank you.
Thank you, John, Professor John Eade, for your elaborating speech. Now, I would like to invite Mr. Niels van den Berg. Niels is a Dutch member of the parliament from GroenLinks, what we call the Green Party, since June 2019. He is the spokesperson of the Green Party on justice, police, intermediate, vocational education, science, and integration. This is his second term as MP in the Dutch Parliament. In 2017, on behalf of UNICEF and together with the Bangladeshi government and civil society organizations, Niels coordinated the reconstruction of drinking water facilities after the worst floods in 40 years. And more importantly, Niels is our Jamai, son-in-law, and is happily married to a Bangladeshi woman and speaks Bangla. Niels took part in the most popular TV program of Bangladesh of Hanif Sanket, Ittadi, for more than 5 years during his stay in Bangladesh. Niels, the floor is yours. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Bikash. Do you hear me?
Yes, very much. Please,
Yeah, that's great because I had some connection problems in the beginning, so I switched devices. I switched from my iPad to my laptop, but great that you're hearing me. So thank you very much for being here. It's an honor. And first of all, before I start shedding my light on Sheikh Mujib's vision and what it means today, I would like to thank all people from especially the Dutch Bangla community, but also wider in Europe, everyone who supported me during the general election campaign. Because the general elections in the Netherlands were held 1.5 weeks ago, and I got a lot of support from the Bangladeshi community in the Netherlands. So thank you very much for that. It's been heartwarming. So now let's talk about the topic of today and about Sheikh Mujib's heritage and what I know about it. First of all, I think it's good to say that I need to be a bit humble in this panel, of course, because what do I know about it compared to people who grew up in Bangladesh who did their PhDs on the topic. But I know something about it because, as Bikash rightly said, I lived in Bangladesh between 2012 and 2017, and I lived in several places: Dinajpur, Rangpur, Bogra, and for a while in Cox's Bazar, where I worked in the Rohingya refugee camps. But I also lived for 5 years in Dhanmondi, in Dhaka. And there I lived actually on the other side of the lake, opposite of Sheikh Mujib's house. And this was a place that I frequented. I used to go there during the weekends, and it inspired me a lot to read parts of Sheikh Mujib's speeches, to learn about his vision, because I think, as a lot of people already said today, he was a big visionary and uncomparable with other political leaders, I think, in the world. And still today, I think his heritage and his vision is inspiring people in Bangladesh, and of course the Bangladeshi diaspora in the rest of Europe and in the rest of the world. What I think is very interesting about his vision is indeed secularism, and a few people already mentioned today that, what is secularism. I think if you read the speeches and the vision of Sheikh Mujib, secularism very much meant, as Professor John also said, like being open towards or being tolerant towards other religions. And this is something that is still very important today in Bangladesh, but also in other parts of the world. I was a member of a parliamentary investigation committee on behalf of the Dutch Parliament, and we looked into how Dutch youngsters radicalize, right? As you might know, a few years back, we had some Dutch young people traveling to Syria to join IS's struggle for the caliphate. And this is something that, it's somehow very difficult to grasp, that people who grow up in the Netherlands, in a secular country with freedom, opportunities, and everything, that at some point in their lives, they get radical views and they travel to another country to join a religious war, if you can even call it a religious war, but that's how they see it themselves. And a similar thing, of course, happened in around 2016 in Bangladesh, as Sir Riaz rightly said. I was living that back then in Bangladesh, and that was, of course, the time that there were quite some terrorist attacks on religious minorities such as Hindu communities, but of course also the terrible attack on Holy Bakery in Dhaka, where quite some foreign people got brutally killed. And if you look at the terrorists who did that, as Riaz rightly said, they didn't develop radical views in madrasas or other places that got a lot of attention or that people are worried about. No, many of them, they actually studied at private schools in Malaysia, where they somehow got infected, you could say, with radical views. And I think the big challenge for us today, whether it's in Bangladesh or whether it's in the Netherlands or other places, is how do we safeguard the line between being proud of your own identity, whether it's ethnic, religious, cultural, so being proud of your own identity and being inclusive, if you know what I mean. There's a thin line between the two, right? It's very much okay to be proud of your own identity. It's very much okay to have even orthodox views, whether they are culturally driven, religiously driven. But it becomes a problem when orthodox views become exclusive and become, in some cases, even violent. And I think the challenge for our modern societies, whether it's in Bangladesh or the Netherlands or other countries in the world, is how do we safeguard that thin line, and how do we make sure that people have maximum freedom to develop their own identities and to believe what they feel they need to believe in or they want to believe in, without becoming violent or exclusive. I think the only way to do that, frankly speaking, is to maintain, to continue engaging in dialogues with each other, like we do today, and like we all do, I think, in the countries where we live in. But that's the only way, I think, to do it, and that's very much, I think, what Sheikh Mujib in his time tried to do. So yeah, personally, I also get a lot of inspiration from his views, and I think we all should, because a secular world in which we can live in freedom and peace is still far away. So it's something we need to build together, and there's still work to be done. So that's I think that's those are my views, so to say, and I'm also here to learn today from the other speakers.
Thank you, Niels from the back. Thank you. I do agree with you what you said on 2 points. The first is that secular world is still far away, and we have to work on it. And surely we also focused on the radicalization of the youth, especially in not only in Netherlands, also the whole Europe, especially in UK. Anyway, we'll be back on those points. Before I now I would like to invite our next speaker. Let me. I got his short brief very late. In fact, just a minute, please. Allow me a short time. I think Ansar has sent some background. Mr. Mohammed Zulkarnain. He is the Deputy High Commissioner of Bangladesh Mission in the UK. And in fact, he has, I already mentioned, replaced Her Excellency, the High Commissioner of Bangladesh in the UK. And Mr. Mohammed Zulkarnain is a career Foreign Service officer belonging to the 17th batch of BCS Foreign Affairs cadre. And Mohammed Zulkar obtained his master's in diplomacy and trade from Monash University. In his distinguished diplomatic career, Zulkarnain has served in various capacities in Bangladesh missions, Washington, D.C., Seoul, and Birmingham. At the headquarters, he worked in various capacities in different wings. Now the floor is to you, Mr. Zulkarnain, please.
Thank you, Bikash. Actually, I am experiencing very terrible connection with both my Mac and iPhone. Honorable Mr. Niels MP, His Excellency Mr. Riaz Hamidullah, Bangladesh Ambassador to the Netherlands, Honorable Mahjabeen Khaled, respected Professor John Eade, and of course President Ansarullah and Moderator Bikash. Distinguished audience, good afternoon, and it's my pleasure to greet all of you. This is my great pleasure to join you in this August gathering of enlightened minds. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak a few words on an important topic of discussion titled The Legacy of Bangabandhu's Secular Political Ideals, Challenges of Radicalization of Bangladesh and the region. At the beginning, I would like to pay my humble tribute to our father of the nation, Bangabandhu Rahman, and pay homage to more than 3 million of our people of all walks of life for their unmatched supreme sacrifice, to more than 200,000 women who became victims of sexual violation and oppression during our war of liberation. Much has been said already. I was deeply captivated.
I think we have some problem with the microphone of Mr. Nine. Are you there, Mr. Nine? is trying to recover. We wait a second, then otherwise we'll move to. I think there is some internet failure. Okay, please.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. Please go ahead.
And so captivated by the deliberation of the enlightened speakers, I have now difficulty adding new points. I'd rather like to focus on the upbringing of Bangabandhu. During his childhood age, Bangabandhu demonstrated utmost sense of benevolence, which crossed the usual periphery of showing a mere sympathy, but rather turned into empathy for. So Bangabandhu showed empathy towards the oppressed people. No doubt this attitude brought him to the core of the people's heart. At his early age, Bangabandhu had witnessed on how the active participation of all groups, all strata of the society really make the society broad, enhanced, and enriched. He was thus a firm believer that all of these diversities in the society essentially form the different branches of the same tree, that is the human society. So apart from mixing and interacting with his Hindu neighbors, Bangabandhu was exposed to Christianism, and while he went to study Christian missionary school, he understood the well and effective functioning of multi-religious society in that part of Bangladesh, and which subsequently formed a bedrock of Bangabandhu's belief in secularism and its very strength. After completing his education in the missionary school, Bangabandhu went to Islamia College, and there he didn't join the traditional parochial theocratic party, but he joined a political party that best served the wider masses of the people. And later, that Bangabandhu changed the name of that party, removed the petty word Islamic party, and for creating greater participation, accommodating greater people, making the people more comfortable, people of other religions more comfortable to his platform. And after the partition of India, Bangabandhu returned to Dhaka, and the capital of Bangladesh, and got himself admitted into the University of Dhaka. As usual, Bangabandhu remained vocal against all sorts of discrimination and oppression. The language movement of our
I think we have to go ahead, and if the connection is recovered, then we'll come back to you.
We can't hear you. You're muted.
Before I give the floor to Ansar Hamidullah, I would like to come back to our speakers for intervention. I would like to draw the attention of Mr. Riaz, the Ambassador of Bangladesh in Netherlands. Can you hear me, Your Excellency?
Yes, I can hear you. In fact, I'm juggling with another webinar and to join somewhere in Toronto on climate change.
Before I give the floor to my colleague Ansar Hamidullah, I would like to come back to you with a point. So you have very rightly and efficiently portrayed these unusually mature figures, and also touched the issue of radicalization. And my point is that we see this alarming rise of intolerance, radicalization, not only in Bangladesh but in the region across the globe. But what is the solution? How can you address this issue? Is it possible through Bangla, and is it possible to sit together with this group of people? Reply, please.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether I got your question right, but still, I think I got it somehow. Let me attempt. I'll bring some instances of contemporary times. I think if you look at our cities, when you look at every country, it's very clear that our cities are increasingly pluralist, cosmopolitan. Look at even Dhaka. Dhaka is a cosmopolitan city. I mean, you have people from so many ethnicities and etc. And cities are also a place, also a space actually where we struggle to get pluralism, inclusion, harmony right. Now, I'm trying to say that, 50 years, 45 years on, where and how we can see the discover and understand and bring or apply some of the values or elements of what actually Bangabandhu espoused and see that are we correct or can we really try that. One is cities. The other is that look at countries in serious challenges or difficulties like Afghanistan or even Myanmar next door, where the rise of majoritarian narrative and the leadership actually allowed that. And now they are in situation they can't go back. That's what actually I had in mind when I said that uh, uh, the thin line of nationalism and patriotism. How do we handle which Bangabandhu got so right? Look at his 7th March, look at his 25th March, 1971, his calls, and then he deftly navigated the nation where he didn't allow this to go beyond, as we say, and as many would often say, Lakshman Rekha or the thin line. That's so crucial. And also, how do we get the understanding of identity? It's so important because one, I just put in the chat box. It started even with him as an individual, as a person. He started with religious identity. He's in his 20s, 30s, and then he evolved himself. Sometimes we do not allow ourselves that evolution as an individual, as a statesman, as a nation state. So that time in 70s, 60s, 80s, when it was so fancy for nation states to go to ride on nationalism, economic given by the economic paradigms or the political paradigms, but he kept the expectation of the nation, and it was not a small population, large population, 70 million at that time, and today 170 million, even today. So I think that's where there are some serious things for Bangabandhu's Bangladesh of today, 170 million, in his times of 70 million, where things didn't go astray, where we could contain ourselves. So containing the expectations of large population in terms of multiple identities, and then when it's globalized, you have so much of technological infusion. How do you do that? I think that's where we need to revisit beyond this conversation. Over to you, Bikash.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Now, my last question to Niels from the back. Niels, so far I remember in our previous program in Brussels, you mentioned about the collaboration between the Netherlands, Bangladesh, and European Union at the same time with Bangladesh, and to effectively reduce extremism. Do you have any idea about that? And you said that to bring the other parties at the table, is it possible to bring the other parties to the table to achieve the goal that you were talking about, or we are talking about? Please, Niels.
Yes, I think we need to do that. That was, I think that was my point in Brussels during the last conference. Indeed, that if you want to fight extremism, you should try to bring as many views as possible at the table, so that certain movements, even if they are very orthodox and difficult for us maybe to understand, for us liberal people, or let me talk for myself. For me, as a liberal person, I can't speak for others, of course. But it is very important that everyone can join the table, because as soon as you start excluding people, groups of people, they will go underground, and that's very risky, because then they are not part of the dialogue anymore. So yeah, I very much believe that that's the challenge for us as policymakers, as politicians, to try and bring everyone at the table, even if it's people with very orthodox views or views that we might not agree with.
Thank you. I wish I could go to other speakers, but I'm out. So I will now go back to invite Ansar Hamidullah to sum up the discussion that we Mr. Ansar is the co-president of the UF and community leader who has lived and worked in the UK since the 1970s. He is the country coordinator of BASUD UK and has organized a number of workshops and seminars for BASUD on migration and development, remittance, democracy, colonization, and law. He also maintains BASUD's contact with the British AAC politicians and British parliamentarians. Answer, the floor is yours, please.
I was just wondering if you want to hear the last words from our Deputy High Commissioner who's just managed to join us again.
Okay, you want to give me the floor, please? And I was very short. Please.
Again and again. Can you hear?
Please be brief. Do you hear us, Mr. Nine?
Yep. Yeah.
Try to be very specific and short, please. Thank you.
Yes. Yes, much has been said about the nature of the Bangabandhu secularism. It's all-inclusive. It's quite different from the Western secularism, which primarily emphasizes on the secular difference, separation of religion from the state. But Bangabandhu secularism means that living with harmony with every member of the society. That is all-inclusive secularism, and Bangabandhu believes that religion is personal things, and a state should protect the religious freedom. And he made a well-balanced approach between the religious freedom and the secularism. So, states should protect. And regarding radicalization, I would like to say that the Bangladesh, the Global Terrorism Index, Bangladesh improved considerably. Bangladesh is the most successful country in South Asia.
We lost it again from Hamidullah, so I think you will take up the purpose.
Okay. Okay, so I mean, my job really is to offer a vote of thanks to all the speakers today and bring this event to an end. But just quickly to summarize, I think it's clear from all the speakers today that Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman got his political grounding during the partition of India in late 40s, 46, 47. And I think some of the speakers has talked about Sheikh Mujib at the time being a witness to sectarian communal violence between the Muslim and the Hindu community in the Indian subcontinent. He was also an activist in protecting the different communities during the riots in Calcutta, and I think it's that experience of Bangabandhu during the partition, perhaps that made him adopt secularism as a tool, not necessarily to negate religion as in the West, but to promote coexistence of multi-faith community, to prevent religious persecution, to prevent majority violence on minority, and also to, I guess, offer space to other voices. And I think with the rise of extremism, radicalism, religious radicalism, and militancy across the globe, Europe, the UK, and in South Asia, I think Bangabandhu's secularism is still relevant as it was during the Indian, Pakistan, and Bangladesh period. The debate will continue around Bangabandhu and Bangabandhu's legacy and his vision. But I think we need to continue to have dialogue. And I personally feel one's identity is perhaps not static; it's fluid, and it's it's impacted upon various factors, including ethnicity, religion, regionalism, profession. I think all those encompasses one's identity. So I think in terms of going forward, we are concurrently celebrating Bangladesh's 50th anniversary as well as Bangabandhu's centenary until March 2022. So we will be holding further online events, and hopefully once the lockdown is lifted, perhaps in person. So until then, I want to thank you all, and look out for further communication, and we do hope to meet in further events. But I want to thank our Dutch ambassador, Mr. Hamidullah, all the way from Bangladesh, Mahjabeen Khaled. Of course, my colleague, Professor John Eade from the UK, and our Dutch Member of Parliament, Niels Berge. And of course, last but not least, today's moderator, Bikash. And I also want to thank a British Bangla News channel who are broadcasting this event online on Facebook and YouTube. And of course, I want to thank our Deputy High Commissioner, Zulkarnain. So on that note, I'm going to hand back to Bikash Bhai, and I guess he will bring the whole event to an end. Thank you, Bikash Bhai.
Thank you. I think today, apart from personally thanks to each and every valid speaker, especially Mr. Zulkarnain, who has jumped in at the last moment, very much. Ms. Mahjabeen Khaled from Bangladesh, she was in touch with us for a long time regarding this program. Thank you very much. And of course, our very good friend, the Dutch MP, Niels van den Berg, Professor John Eade from London. John, thank you so much. And we're sorry that we couldn't show your PowerPoint presentation. I think we did it, but anyway. And of course, and our Bangladesh ambassador in the Netherlands, Mr. Hamidullah, Riaz Hamidullah, and my good friend, Mr. Hamidullah. With this, and last but not the least, our thanks to the host of this program, British Bangla News Channel, and its CEO, Mr. P.H.D. Munir. Thank you, everybody. Good day. With this.